So one of the most difficult things to do for a cinematographer is to set up a nice looking interview in harsh daylight. You really do need specific types of gear to actually get that done. So today we have a minimalist setup with the least amount of gear as possible to actually achieve the goal so it doesn't look like this. Just a really harsh, hot light on your subject, harsh shadows. Let's take a look at the gear we have with us and we'll see if we can make it happen. So this is my minimalist setup for setting up a nice looking interview outside, and you're trying to go as cheap as possible. I have my nice stands with me, but you can use cheaper stands. So we have 3 stands. These have impact clamps on the top of them. I'll put those in a link in the description below in case you're interested in those. And so we have 2 stands that mirror each other with the impact clamps. And then we have also a 3rd stand with a more common just diffuser or bounce clamp. So we'll have that for our bounce or our negative fill, depending on what's necessary. If you're filming outside, sometimes things could get windy, so we have 3 sandbags to weigh down our 3 stands. And then finally, we have the tools which we'll actually use to make a nice looking interview, and that's diffusion, bounce, and negative fill. And so we have 3 different items, but there's really only 2. I just have 2 of the 5-in-1 reflectors, but the main things we're going to be using are this large Newer diffusion, fairly cheap on Amazon or B&H. It's a little bit bigger than, say, the 5-in-1 circular diffusers, and you're going to need that if you actually are filming someone doing an interview because you don't want to have too many shadows in the shot. And then we have these beautiful 5-in-1 diffusers, incredibly useful in a lot of different scenarios. They're called 5-in-1 because they have 5 different ways they can be used. If you take off the outside cover, it just becomes a diffuser that you can shoot light through, but it also has a silver side, a gold side, a black side, and a white side. So I almost always use them as either a diffuser, which I'm punching light through, as the white side as a bounce, or the black side as a negative fill. So we'll see what we need today. I think negative fill on a bright day like this will probably look pretty nice, but potentially need some bounce just to get a little bit more exposure on our interviewee's face. So let's get out in the hot sun and see if we can make this work. Hey everyone, taking a quick break from testing out some new lenses to let you know that the video you're watching is actually part of my new course, the 10 Steps to Cinematic Interviews, which you can access in the link in the description below. And it's only open till Cyber Monday, so if you're looking for a easy to follow, step-by-step process of creating cinematic interviews, no matter the location or how much time you have to do it, check out that course. All right, I'm gonna get back to testing lenses, and you get back to June, where it looks quite a bit warmer than it is now here in mid-November. So one of the main difficulties when shooting in daylight is actually trying to find a good reverse key, which is difficult to do, especially at high noon like it is now. So we're gonna do the best we can to get a nice light fall off across the face and don't fall into the trap of broadside lighting. The sun's kind of right above us, but it's also a little bit off to this side. And so Ali, if you turn towards me, right away here, we're starting to see a kind of a reverse key coming from this side and falling across his face, where we have the light side on this side of his face and the shadow side on this side. So we kind of have 2 options. We could either set it up like this, or we could spin in 180 degrees, because if you spin, the sun is obviously a giant source. One more, there we go. Actually a little less. Yeah, right there, so a little less than 100 degrees. The sun's still kind of falling across his face, but not as much. We're getting some harsher shadows in this angle. And so I think probably, unless you really, really wanted to have, say, the building in the background, and maybe they're talking about that specific building, but if it's just a general outside shot, I like to have greenery behind my interviewees. And so I'm gonna spin Ali around the other direction, and then we'll find a nice interview spot. All right, so now that Ali is in position, let's say we're gonna go a little bit wider. We're gonna open our aperture up to f2 just to get a little bit of a blurrier background. All right, so look at me as if I'm interviewing you. And so right now we are getting a nice light fall off across his face. We're still using the reverse key method, right? Just because we're outside doesn't mean you can just kind of place the interviewee anywhere. So we wanna make sure they're in the right position. It's a very harsh light, it's a hard light, right? So we wanna soften that to make it more appealing. And we're gonna set up a big diffuser on 2 stands and see if that works. All right, let's do it. All right, and because of the position of the sun right now, because it's so high in the sky and not early in the morning or later in the afternoon, this diffuser is probably gonna have to go almost level above Ali here. So I'm going to put it straight out and clamp it in, and then we'll see if we can move it into a good position. It is so very hot. All right, so if you look down here on the ground, you start seeing that shadow, and that's kind of where we want to position our interviewee. They want to sit in that shadow. It's much cooler for them, but that is also what's going to be diffusing our light. And so we can either just move them into the shadow, or obviously we can just move the shadow towards them. So I'll go ahead and do that. Again, easier with a friend, and voila. And obviously now we have a giant stand in the shot, so depending on what we are shooting and how we're going to shoot it, we obviously want to eliminate that. And then you can also reposition your camera a little bit to help you out. All right, so I'm going to just bring my tripod up a little bit to get a little bit more of an eye level shot. Slightly below eye level, looks nice. All right, so already that's looking worlds better. The light is not nearly as harsh. It's very soft on his face, which is what we're going for. And it still has a slight reverse key. Obviously the sun is so directly above us, it's a little harder to have that light fall across his face. And you could either bounce more light back into the interviewee, or you could add some negative fill to create some shadows. So I think this one calls for some negative fill, so we're gonna do that. So we just wanna get this as close to our interviewee as possible. And so we're trying to create shadows on his face. And so the closest we can get that, better it'll be. And already that's looking much better. So the negative fill is giving us a lot more shadow detail, or deeper shadows on the camera side of his face, which gives it more dimension and a little bit more intriguing to look at. So one difficult aspect of shooting interviews outside, especially when you diffuse things and add negative fill, is getting that eye light, which we all love. And that's because the light source is directly above our interviewee. And so there are different ways you could potentially get that eye light, maybe putting a small light here, just get that twinkle. I could use this white bounce as our third bounce and connect it to another stand to get a little bit of an eye light. Problem is it's also blinding Ali here, and so I don't think any interviewee would be very comfortable with that. And so kind of on a case-by-case basis on whether it's necessary to get that eye light. If the sun was much lower in the sky, if it was 5 p.m. or 8 a.m., then it would be a lot easier to get that eye light because the light would be more at eye level, which makes sense. So if you are going to do an interview outside, I would recommend don't do it at 12:30 in the afternoon in June. But if you have to, this is maybe one of the best ways you can do it. So there's a pretty minimal amount of gear that you need to actually achieve this result compared to just direct sliding light beaming down on your interviewee. And so let me know if you have any questions in the comments below, and we'll see you in the next video. So I hope you enjoyed that video on setting up great looking outdoor setups with a minimal amount of gear. I could use some of that gear right now as I test out these lenses. But if you enjoyed that video, please do check out the 10 steps to cinematic interviews in the link in the description below, and make sure you do that before Cyber Monday, because I'm closing the doors to get some feedback and make some changes before I make the course available again sometime next spring. 25% off using code EARLYBIRD25. Click the link in the description below, and I'll see you over there.